even though I had the knowledge from this mentoring program, every property is so different that until you're hands-on and experiencing it, no matter what you read in books, you need your actual knowledge now, right? Because he taught us how well to underwrite. You have your underwriting tools, you do your market analysis, et cetera, right? But once you acquire a property, a lot of the teaching kind of ends. And so the asset management is so different property to property, depending on what you find afterwards.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am Yona Weiss, and we are Sandhya Seshadri and Yona Weiss, who's here today as my guest. And I'm so glad that you've joined me today, Sandhya. What's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be a guest on your show. I have followed you on LinkedIn and listened to many podcasts where you explain your favorite topic of cost segregation. So it's quite exciting to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. You know, I did the podcast rounds for a couple of years before I decided to start this podcast. But here we like to talk about other kinds of stuff. So it's funny. Sometimes I'll talk to a new client and they'll be like, "Oh, I saw you have a podcast." I'm like, "I'll go listen to that and I'll learn all about cost segregation." I'm like, no. We're not going to learn anything about cost segregation on this podcast. So go ahead and listen to some other podcasts and we'll do it there. Maybe I should do one episode just to put it out there. Who knows? Maybe one day. But Sandhya, I'd love you get a little background on yourself. I know right now I can say what I know about you, which is that you are a multifamily syndicator. You've been doing that for several years, and now both passively and actively. And right now, currently I don't even know. I can't keep track of how many doors, how many apartment buildings you have. But give a little background and tell us how you got into multifamily in the first place.
So like most Asian geeks, I went to school, got a job, made good grades, etc., got into the tech industry. So electrical engineering was my first degree and worked for a Fortune 500 company and realized very quickly that business people make all the decisions. So I decided to go back for an MBA. And that's where my finance, accounting, all of the stock market, et cetera, knowledge came into play. And I realized very quickly that my engineering salary, while it was wonderful, wasn't quite going to get me to my financial goals. So I started trading actively in the stock market. So I did that for over 2 decades. Then when I had a family, et cetera, halfway through that, I realized, okay, I'm making enough money from the stock market. I'm not going to stay in the corporate rat race anymore. So I went full-time into that. And then
full-time into stock trading?
Yeah, but I probably did it only for about 2 or 3 hours a day. And that was plenty to, do what I needed. So then I was being a mom the rest of the time, hanging out with my kids and PTAs and all of that kind of lifestyle. But afterwards, I always wanted to do something with real estate, but didn't have the background to be a handy person. I always felt like a contractor could fool me with large estimates on things and I wouldn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, I can't do these single family rentals or fix and flip kind of things. Mm-hmm. But when I heard about multifamily being an asset manager and the passive investing side first, it's like, that's a great way to step into it and understand it a little bit better and without taking on all the risks of like signing a loan or running a property myself. So I started out by investing passively using my retirement funds and then found that, okay, this is great. I can partner with people with more experience and syndicated my own deals after that.
Very cool. So where did you first hear about like the multifamily? Because obviously, like you said, a lot of people, when they hear about real estate, like the thing about single families and, watching HGTV and, I can't do that. I'm not a fix and flipper. But then like, you heard about somehow about investing passively in multifamily. Like, where did that come from? Like left field? Like what?
A friend actually in my neighborhood who's, a dad of one of my daughter's friends. And we've been in boards and committees, et cetera, together. And he told me, hey, if you ever want to get into this, because he's been doing a lot of single family rentals and flips and things like that. I said, I could never see myself doing that. And then he said, well, here's a way. So he's actually mentioned a weekend webinar, seminar by one of the gurus in multifamily investing. Right. And I attended a weekend event like that in Dallas. And this, my mentor is based in Dallas. So once I attended the event, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So that was an easy decision for me. So that's how I got into it.
That's amazing. I hear more. Yeah. I hear more and more people that they kind of start out like that. There's all these weekend seminars and a lot of, I mean, you call them gurus, but a lot of people actually do have a lot of experience in the real estate investing space and sharing the knowledge, albeit, with a nice fee to participate with other people to get them involved. And I think it really has taken a lot of people out of that, what do you call it? The rat race or whatever you want to call it. Right. The corporate America, and kind of give them the vision that they can do something else. They can create wealth through a different way.
Yep. I think like if someone like me with no real estate background can just switch into it and do it, I feel like anyone can. They just have to be willing to put in the time and learn from someone who has done it before. So follow someone who's done what you want to be doing, and that'll help you get there faster with fewer mistakes, especially when it's a syndication where it's other people's money involved. Right. You want to minimize those mistakes. It's fine if you take a duplex and try to run it yourself, but multifamily is definitely a team sport, and you want to have experienced people to help you.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned that you had a mentor, like starting out, right?
Yes.
How long did it take from you, having a mentor and learning until you were able to feel comfortable enough to actually take on more responsibilities and be more active?
It took me 8 months from the date I signed my mentoring program to syndicating my first deal, but it was with experienced partners. Okay. And I served as boots on the ground because I wanted to understand the asset management side of it. And I'm in Dallas, and both my partners were out of state. So it was a perfect partnership in the sense that they were still out there making all the decisions, but I could go there and physically be there when vendors showed up, get involved more in the property management and asset management side, et cetera, and learn the ropes and not make as many mistakes.
That's interesting. So, I mean, would you recommend that? Obviously, doing it, you had to have some sort of mentorship. You had that. That was obviously very beneficial for you. But for someone who's like thinking to want to get involved, it sounds like that's an easy barrier of entry. Like if you're boots on the ground somewhere and other people, and you're in a market that others that want to invest in, maybe that's a good role to play.
Yeah, I think that's a very good role to play if you're willing to spend the time and energy to do that, because then you have something to offer to an experienced sponsor, which is I will, spare you your time, which is the most valuable resource you can think of, by doing all this grunt work for you and reporting back to you. So you're still making all the decisions as the person who knows what they're doing. But by doing all of this hands-on, I learn a lot too. So it's a win-win situation for us both, because for me, even though I had the knowledge from this mentoring program, every property is so different that until you're hands-on and experiencing it, no matter what you read in books, you need your actual knowledge now, right? Because he taught us how well to underwrite. You have your underwriting tools, you do your market analysis, et cetera, right? But once you acquire a property, a lot of the teaching kind of ends. And so the asset management is so different property to property, depending on what you find afterwards. So the honeymoon is over. Now the reality begins. And so there is no, textbook for whether it's marriage or really for asset management specific to different properties. I mean, you follow through on your business plan, but the reality sometimes is different. So it's nice to have experienced people that you can depend on your first deal.
Sure. And then, but now you're handling deals yourself, right? You're like the main
now
decision
I'm the lead.
maker.
Yes. Because, once you go through a couple of 60s properties, you're like, okay, I think I can handle this pretty well. And you also learn a lot from your property management company. That's one of your best resources. So your local hands-on property management company that has that experience, who can tell you, okay, this strategy is going to work here, but it's not going to work at this property because this is not your same demographic and
I would say
resident base there. So
I would say the property management is either your best or your worst resource, right?
Yeah. Find a good one and then stick with them in any new market.
Well, I mean, what kind of... You had any like hiccups along the way, any kind of bad experiences or anything that, because obviously stepping into a new profession, which is really what it is. I mean, it's not like you're retired now, right? I mean, don't let anyone think that, but so in this new profession that you've kind of taken on of real estate, which has tremendous benefits, obviously has the tax benefits, has the equity, the long-term wealth building, but what are some of those things like you learned along the way in the experience that you're just like, oh, wow, that was a hard lesson?
Yeah. So COVID definitely brought a lot more focus and emphasis on asset management. But like we have a 60s property that has a boiler and chiller, et cetera. So it's a property a lot of people stayed away from. But we felt like, okay, we have a large enough sponsorship team with enough people local to it that we can handle it. And we retained the same property management company who'd been running it before. So we felt like, okay, they know what they're doing. They've already been running this property. And that was a big mistake because they just were set in their ways. They didn't really serve their residents very well. And so you could never get rid of all of the reviews, the bad reviews on Yelp and stuff about it, until we decided to get rid of them and bring in another property management company. So that was definitely a big lesson learned in the sense that, go back and read what residents really say about this PM company. How has the customer service been? Look up some other properties run by the same PM company, and you'll learn from that to see whether or not you want to keep them.
That's huge. I mean, obviously you have to go through that to experience that in order to fix it, in order to make it better. Because like any business, that's going to be any challenge you have that's going to come up. You got to figure out a solution. And if it means making such a big, drastic move, like changing the property management, which is huge. I mean, let's not make it sound like it was an easy decision to make, right? I'm sure that came with some heartache.
Yeah, it's difficult to make that decision, but it's the right thing to do. So what you have to keep in mind is 3 months from today or 6 months from today, if I continue the same way that I am I going to achieve my result? And the answer was clear no. So then we started working with the lender to get their approval, because you need to get your lender's approval. We could also tell that the property management company did not have a good relationship with the city. So, in terms of every time we wanted to do some project, there would be some hassle with the city. And so you right away knew, okay, this is not how we want to operate. Gotcha. And so 5 months into owning the property, we fired them and brought in a new company. And it's been like day and night. Like it's a huge difference bringing this company in.
Amazing. And one of the things I love that you do, and I've seen you share some of this stuff, is that you try to be involved in the community. I mean, you live in Dallas, right? And all your properties are in the Dallas market. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And so you're really involved in making those individual communities a better place, right? So what are some of those things that you do to actually make it feel like more of a community and actually like giving back?
So we want to bring the residents together with some kind of an activity at least every other month or so. So right now, for example, we just finished a back to school bash because we're now in the end of August timeframe, and schools start in Texas in early to mid-August. And the next thing that we're planning is like some kind of either a fall festival or actual Halloween costume contest. So last year in 2020, when we had COVID, we had it all online. So all the residents would post their pictures with kids or grown-ups in costumes online. And then we would have a drawing and, vote on the best costume and give away some gift cards. And then we normally have a summer barbecue kind of outing with the, grilling some hot dogs and kind of a picnic style of resident event. And at that time, we couldn't do it for COVID. So we instead made up treat bags and we dropped them off prepackaged items rather than cooked items that would be handled by people. For Thanksgiving, we had a free Thanksgiving frozen turkey for every resident. That's like a nice big, 15-pound turkey, which I think is the most expensive part of your Thanksgiving meal. So the residents were very excited. We distributed them like on the Friday before Thanksgiving. Some people said they were going off to their parents' house or something for Thanksgiving, so we gave them pies, but that was a big one. And then for Christmas, we had a door decorating contest again. And then we had a Santa's mailbox so kids could write letters, and then parents got to know what their kids really wanted for Christmas and things like that. So, we just make it fun. Of course, we always have some kind of a treat bag or, as the residents are leaving for work, at the entrance, we'd give away like a little breakfast to go or something like that. So we always try to do something that brings the community together, or this new property we acquired 4 weeks ago is located right by a school. So on a Friday afternoon, we're planning to bring a shaved ice truck so that the people in the schools can see it as they're waiting in carpool and say, oh, this is that cool apartment that has all these fun activities for residents. It's a little bit of marketing too.
Sure.
But I think the biggest benefit that people don't realize by doing these things is you build a sense of community. And so your leasing manager, your property manager, they have a personal relationship starting to grow with these residents. And so when you have trouble like last year with COVID, the residents were willing to come forward and tell us, hey, I actually lost my job from COVID. And so I can't pay my rent. And so they were willing to have those conversations. We were able to help a lot of them make payments. And then 3 months later, this one lady, she got her job and she was able to come back and get fully caught up. And so we just spread the amount she owed us over the rest of her lease term. And then there was another resident for whom we helped them fill out the TRR forms. So, the community building is a huge part. Because, I remember when I first arrived here, 2 suitcases in hand, $8 a week kind of food budget is what I had. And so, you live in an apartment, that is your home. This is the home in which, you welcome your friends. This is where you celebrate your Christmas, etc. So these are people's homes. So you maintain them well and take care of these residents, and you'll have them staying and coming back and referring their friends. And then, they sort of build a community themselves. It makes it harder for them to leave. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's amazing. It really does. It trickles down to every single resident. And if you don't mind me asking, what was that like for you coming here from, from foreign country at a young age and kind of starting out, the way that you did? And what was that like? I think the motivation for me back in India was I grew up with highly educated parents, but because of the exchange rate, what they made per month was only $60 US. Right. So that's not going to help me pay for a $20K a year kind of college. So I landed in Southern Methodist University in Dallas, SMU, which was a private college. And the reason I could come there is because they gave me 100%, tuition covered, plus a stipend of $500 a month, which at that time felt to me like $1 million. I mean, your parents combined make $60 a month, and here you are offered a scholarship of $500 a month. I felt like on top of the world kind of thing. And, the only thing that motivated me to do that is, I was fascinated by the United States. So I was like, what does it take to get there? So as a teenager, I had other priorities in life besides my books. But I realized if I made really good test scores and just, buckled down and studied for a year and made good grades, I could get there. And so I was like, I have to give this a shot. And so just that focus for that 1 year, just to do nothing but focus on my academics, focus on getting good test scores and apply. And why not? If nothing works, I still have whatever is my existing life, but why not give that a shot? So once I got here, it was like, yeah, you could tell, it was a private college. You could tell everybody was really affluent, etc. But, as students somehow, until you look at their cars and stuff, you don't really realize it as much. And so I guess I was oblivious to how much more well-off my classmates were, and we just had a great time. You bond very well as teens, I think, when you have things in common like music and culture and just the excitement, I think, of being in the United States for me was worth it. That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. And it just shows you you buckle down, you have make your priorities and focus, and really took you to a great place. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you didn't grow up with what, a lot of people call the American dream, whatever they want to call it. But it's you get a job, you buy a house, you settle down, and it just is like a circular thing. People don't even think about it. At a certain point, obviously you realize pretty quickly from, as you mentioned earlier on, that wasn't what it was all about, right? It wasn't about just making money and being in a W-2 job for the rest of your life, right? And you got out of that pretty quickly. Yeah, I got out of that pretty quickly because after a decade, actually I stayed a decade, which is quite a bit of time. I also really loved certain parts of my job because I was in a marketing role once I got my MBA, and I used to do trade shows and travel the world. And so my job took me to places like Taiwan and Israel and India and Germany and Japan, et cetera, right? So I've been to so many exotic destinations thanks to my job. So I love world travel, and I'm very grateful to my company for giving me all of that. But after a while, it became, your 70, 80-hour work week. It became weekends and everything else. So to get to the next couple of tiers in the company, I knew what I had to do, and I wasn't willing to do that anymore. It's like, okay, I've reached a plateau here. I need to go and do something else. And the stock market and trading was so easy. And, a couple of hours a day, I pretty much got my financial goal. So I was like, imagine if I had the whole day, I could do whatever I wanted. So I said, let me take a sabbatical. Let me decide if I really want to go back. And once I was out of it, it was like, oh, there's no going back. I don't want someone else to be the boss of my time. And that's where, the stock market was great, but then you have a crash like it happened in 2008 or any other time. And you realize, okay, I know every millionaire had something to do with real estate, at least 90% of them. And so I was like, how do I go about doing this rental business, but making it profitable at a higher scale? Because the basic rental property only gave me like $300-400 a month kind of thing. And it's like, It's not worth signing bank loans, et cetera, to do that. Yeah. So that's where multifamily really made sense. So now it's like, oh, this is perfect. I get to be the happy mom taking care of communities kind of side, but I also get to use my business knowledge, my numbers, my financials to run properties the right way. And it's a win-win. It really is a perfect win-win. And I get to choose how many I do. So a lot of people do acquire a new property every month. And I'm like, maybe 2 a year, maximum load is 3, So I have my balance. I really like to focus and get the property into what I call a cruising altitude. So the first 3 months are very critical to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So I take it at my pace that works for me. And you can't be distracted by what's going on around the world. Oh, this person's done this person's done this. Okay, well, does it work for you? Right? You got to do what works for you.
Right, exactly. And it is a business, right? And everyone runs a business differently. Like you don't have to necessarily look at how every other single business is operating in order to run yours the way that you know and want to run it, right? I mean, people have other goals also, right? You're like the people out there, they're like, I need to have, $1 billion under acquisition. Like you don't strike me as the person that has those kind of goals.
It's not a number goal as much as it is, I want to make sure I beat every return that I initially projected. That's more important to me. And for that, until I get comfortable with the PM company rolling this property in the right direction, and even then you have disasters like Snowmageddon or something happen that will completely, take away all your time. So if I had to worry about a dozen properties with Snowmageddon, right, that happened to us in, spring of 2021 here in Texas, that would be a big problem. So I only had 2 properties to mainly worry about. So that was easy. And each of them only had like 1 unit or a laundry room affected. So that was much more manageable. But I have friends whose properties were near mine who had 6-10 units down. How do you take care of those residents and bring those units back up? Right. So, and imagine if you had that problem across a dozen properties, that's more than I want to be stressed about.
Right. Totally. In that case, you would definitely, obviously people like that, maybe, and not necessarily, maybe they have like a larger team that's handling that. But if they don't, then they're stuck and they're kind of, it's going to hit into their returns. It's going to hit into their investors' returns. And it's not going to be, you're not going to have happy campers that are coming back investing again.
Yeah. So taking care of your 2 customers, one is your residents of your communities and the other is your investors.
Right.
And that's my job. So there's a certain capacity beyond which I don't want to go to serve both of those.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, let's transition now into what I like to call the final 4. And these are 4 questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first question for you is going to be, what's the worst job that you ever had?
I had a job as someone who had to operate these cameras for classrooms. And every time the professor started going to the whiteboard, you'd focus on a different camera versus when he spoke, you would have to go to a different camera. And then when he did a demo. So juggling those with one particular professor was such a hassle. And he would always yell, come on, you camera girl, let's do this faster. But it paid me at that time $4.25 an hour. And boy, that was a lot of money. So
well, you're dating yourself a little bit now, but no, that's funny. Nowadays they have like these little gadgets that you just push a button and it switches cameras,
I know. I'm definitely dating myself.
Very cool. Awesome. So that was probably not a lot of fun, especially with the feedback that you got on that. What's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
A lot of people say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. For me, it was something very similar, but the syndication books I read. So between Joe Fairless, the best ever syndication book, and then the passive investing book by James Kandasamy. So both of these books are reasonable.
Shout out to James and Joe. Great books. Awesome.
Yeah, they're both great books. And then if I can mention my mentor and his teachings, that's Brad Sumrock. Definitely those 3 changed my life in terms of learning about apartment syndications.
Totally. Yeah. Totally paradigm shift, right? Because it opens you up to something you didn't even know was possible, was imaginable. Exactly. I see it all the time, but you're a great example of someone who's done that. So it's, kudos to you. So third question is going to be, what's a skill or talent that you'd like to learn?
I would like to learn to actually do beautiful, successful podcasts like you. I would like to learn to be a LinkedIn master like you. So those would be the whole mastering social media. That would be my next thing I want to conquer.
Okay. Well, it's not that difficult of a challenge, and especially someone like you, I'm sure you'll crush it. You'll do great. Social media is a lot of fun, but the podcasting does take a little bit of effort. But if my one advice would be, and this, a good friend of mine told me this before I started my podcast, is like, don't start a podcast unless you love it, right? Mm-hmm. Don't do it for any other reason. If you're looking to like reach a lot of people, you're looking to do this or that, some people want to monetize like a business. You're not going to be successful. It won't last. And that's why, just like, there's this statistic, like 80% of small businesses that open fail within the first year, right? Mm-hmm. Or more. And with podcasts is the same thing. I mean, you look the statistics of how many podcasts are started each year, and then how many have lasted for more than a year. I think it's a much higher percentage of those that don't make it through the first year. So that would be my one suggestion is, if you enjoy it and you love it, do it.
Okay. That's good to know, because that's why I've hesitated to do one yet. Like the commitment and the consistency and being able to sound as interesting as Yona, no matter which guest you talk to, et cetera, is a lot.
I hope that's the case, but I appreciate that. And last and finally, what does success mean to you, Sandhya?
Freedom of time to do whatever I want, whenever I want, and wherever I want, and not being, and having choices. So I choose to be in real estate. It's not my only choice. Just like I chose to quit the corporate world, and I chose to, go full time into the stock market.
That sounds like, that's a lot of freedom there. And there are so many different aspects to freedom, so that's amazing. And so you are successful. That's it, right?
In that sense, yes, because it gives me time to spend with my family. So I have the balance between work and life, as I call it. So it's very important.
Yeah. So, that's really what it's all about. If you feel like you're doing what you love to do and you have the freedom to do that, and then you are successful. You're living up to all of that. So I appreciate that, and continue, wish you much continued success. And where can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
I have a website, multifamilyforyou.com, where 4 is the number 4 and YOU.com. And they can put their name, email address, and send me a short note, and we can connect. And certainly I'm on LinkedIn following you. So you'll find me around Yona Weiss and his posts.
There you go. Yeah. Wherever you find me, you'll find Sandhya on LinkedIn. I appreciate you taking the time out today. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a fun conversation, getting to know you a little better also. And that's it. Any final words for our audience?
If I can do it, anyone can. So, you see where I started and how far I've gotten. You just need to focus and only listen to people who support you and your mission, and you'll get there.
Awesome. Love that message. And to our listeners, remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.